Greetings everyone, this is an informal introduction to the if statement in Java. If statements allow you to perform tests and have your program do something different depending on how the test came out. So the code that I have so far is I'm going to ask the user to type a number and save that into num1. I'll ask them to type another number and save that into num2. Alright, so here's some different kinds of tests you can do. You can ask if number 1 is larger than number 2. And if it is, the computer will do whatever is contained within the curly brackets. This is called a block of code, so it's whatever's inside this block. So for example, I could print line num1 is larger than num2. And, oops, there we go. And as you can see, when I run the program, I'll type a number like, let's see, it's only going to test if num1 is larger than num2, so I'd better make num1 larger. So 10, and then 3, and there it printed 10 is larger than 3, because it performed this test. This evaluated to true, and if this is true, then it will perform what's inside there. So for example, let's run it again, and this time I'll type 310. This time it doesn't do anything, because it runs this line. Num1 is 3, num2 is 10, so this if statement is false, and when it's false, it jumps straight to the closing brace and continues. So let me introduce you to another statement. I could do this. I could say if num2 is larger than num1, then I could print line num2 is larger than num1. So now, whichever one was larger, it would print out the right thing. But instead of doing that, you can use the word else. So first of all, notice how the curly braces connect. So I've got my if statement, which tests to see if num1 is larger than num2. If it is, then the computer executes everything from here to there. The word else means otherwise. So if this is not true, then it will jump to the else statement. The way you'd read this in English is, if num1 is greater than num2, do this. Otherwise, do this. So the code that's contained inside this else block right here will only run if this if statement is false. So think about it this way. This runs when the if statement is true. This runs when the if statement is false. So let's go ahead and run it, and I'll show you what happens when num1 is 3 and num2 is 10. In this case, it prints 10 is larger than 3, but it's displaying this one. You can tell because I'll add some exclamation marks, and then you can tell. 3, 10. So it's got exclamation marks, so you can tell that it's actually running this print statement and not the first one. All right, you don't always, of course, have to have an else statement. You could have an if statement by itself, and that's okay. All right, so what other kinds of tests you can have? You could have if num1 equals num2. You need two equal signs, remember, because in Java a single equals sign is about assignment. It means calculate what's on the right and save it inside the variable on the left. Two equals signs will result in a Boolean value, so it's asking the question, are these two things actually equal, yes or no? If you want to ask if two things are not equal, you do exclamation mark equals. Sometimes the exclamation mark is called bang, so you might say bang equals. So they're not equal. And here I will say they're equal. You can do greater than or equal to, and you can also do less than or equal to. So go ahead and type these ones in and run it a couple of times and try and make each of these things display by entering different numbers for num1 and num2. Okay, I'm going to show you another important thing, which is how you can combine several tests together in a single if statement. So let's say I want to test if num1 is between 5 and 10. You might think that you could do something like this. This is wrong, but you might think you could do it. if 5 is less than num1 is less than 10. Because you can do that in math class, but you cannot do that in Java. The reason why is because you actually have two separate tests you're trying to perform. You're asking if num1 is larger than 5, and you're also asking if num1 is smaller than 10. So there is a way to ask if two tests are true at the same time, but you have to write out the tests in full using a double ampersand. So the way you would read this is, if 5 is smaller than num1, and also, this double ampersand means and also, num1 is smaller than 10, then what's inside will execute. I want to be very clear here. So what goes on either side of the double ampersand, it's got to be a complete test that results in a Boolean true or false, and on the other side, another complete test that results in a true or false. And the entire statement is only true if both tests are true. So if one of those two returns false, then the whole thing is false. So that's why I told you to pronounce this and also, because then you won't accidentally get the logic wrong. Alright, so there's another way to combine them, combine two tests called the OR statement. So let's test if the user entered 5 or 10. So we could test if num2 equals 5, and then that vertical bar, which you get by holding the shift key and pressing backslash, that vertical bar is called the pipe symbol. So you have two pipe symbols in a row, and that's pronounced OR. So if num2 equals 5 or num2 equals 10, you typed 5 or 10. OR is similar to AND. You have to have a complete test that returns true or false on either side. But in order for the entire if statement to be true when you're using OR, only one of these needs to be true. So either this could be true, or this one could be true, or they could both be true. So that's OR and AND. Let's do one last set of tests. So you can use these numerical comparisons when you're using numbers, but what if we were going to do like a password guessing program? So I'll say jOptionPane.show input dialog, enter a password, and I'm going to check the guess of the password. So if guess equals, my password is password. So this is wrong, but it's what I think you would most naturally want to type. So you can only use double equals when you're comparing primitive data types like int or, well, you really would not want to use it with double either. Strings are objects, and you can tell they're objects because the data type starts with a capital letter, string. When you're using objects, instead of double equals, you have to use the dot notation, which runs a method dot equals. So this means the same thing as what I just erased. It means check to see if the string inside this variable is equal to this input. And if it's true, then we'll evaluate that. So if I run it, I'll type some numbers, and now I'll guess the password is lobster, and it didn't do anything because I got the password wrong. But now if I type the password, now it displays you got the password because I got it right. Well, okay, so when you have numbers, and if you want to test if something is not equal, you would do this. You would say if num1 bang equal, not equal, num2. So how can you do the same thing with strings? How could you say, is the guess not equal to password? You can put the bang right at the very beginning of the statement, because a bang by itself will take the opposite Boolean value. So if this evaluates to true, putting a bang in front of it will turn it into false. If this evaluates to false, the bang in front will turn it true. You can think of this as saying not. So I would read this in English as, if it's not true, that guess equals password. And you can do this for other Boolean expressions as well. So for example, if I wanted to, I could do the following. I could say, if it's not true, that num1 equals num2. So it would try and evaluate this first. This would return true or false. And then I would make it the opposite using bang. So let's do one more, just to make sure that works. So I'm typing some numbers. I'm going to get the password wrong this time by typing lobster. And now it says you didn't get the password because it asked, is guess equal to password? And the answer was false. This turned it true. And so the overall if statement returned true because my guess was not equal to password. Okay, so that's been a very quick overview of a lot of different things. Feel free to come back and refer to this video. If you haven't been typing along, I would recommend going back and typing along and pausing the video periodically and just testing things. And make up your own examples. Even if you think you get it, just go ahead and give a little try, make a new example here, and see what you can get.